Man, my date booty called another dude in front of me mid-date last night and left. What's the worst date you've experienced? My college crush asked me out on a date and I was so happy. Showed up to the restaurant, she arrives, we get a table and start chatting. About 10 minutes in, another dude shows up and sits down with us. I'm super confused, but she introduces him as a friend, and I mean, what am I supposed to do? A few minutes later, this dude goes to the bathroom, and while he's gone, she leans in close to me, tells me this is the guy she really wants to date, but she's not sure if he's right for her. She wants me to evaluate him because she really values my opinion and wouldn't date a guy I didn't approve of. She didn't exactly make a booty call in front of me, but she asked me on a date to get my approval for the guy she really wanted. Some things stick with you forever. I was invited on a date by a woman I met on Tinder. She said her friend was in town and they were going to see a live podcast and invited me with them. It was a podcast I'd never heard of before, and honestly, I probably wouldn't be very interested in it if I wasn't invited, but it cost like $25 to get in. I get there and she meets me and we buy a drink and sit down. She introduces me to her friend. Then they proceed to talk to each other, not involving me in the conversation at all. Then some guy comes along and sits next to her friend. He introduces himself to me, and I thought he was just being friendly. After the podcast, my date and her friend are still talking to each other and ignoring me. This guy who introduced himself to me is kind of following us, and he starts having a conversation with me, which is fine because my date wasn't talking to me at all. It turns out this guy was her friend's date, but I had no idea because no one was saying anything to me. The girls then wanted to meet the guy who was doing the podcast, so we waited in line for a while. Of course, the girls never said anything to us guys. The girls then started talking to another woman in line and seemed to make a friend. After they got to meet the guy who did the podcast, my date friend turns to us guys and says, "Well, we think we're going to have a girls' night out now." So our dates and the woman they met just left to go get drinks or something. The other guy and I just turned to each other and said, "WTF?" We then decided to go to a nearby bar for a beer and have a bro date. He was a decent dude, but the whole situation was just so weird. She brought her friends and expected me to pay for everyone. Her friends were cool, but the date ended up being a girls' night out on me. Yeah, no thanks. Edit, thanks for all the votes. To clarify, I did not pay for anything. My meal and drinks came to $30 of the $300-odd bill. I tipped the waiter $30 and toilet dashed. Thanks for the reward. Didn't think my ill-fated date warranted it. On 3 separate occasions, with 3 different women in different states. At the end of the second date, these young ladies apparently had a change of heart on their sexuality and came out to me as being a lesbian. It is for that reason some of my friends refer to me as Team Changer. We had a lovely time eating and went on to have a cocktail at the River Bar. It is a popular place to have a date. After having a seat, she looked around and suddenly acted weird. At some point, she stood up and went to a table, arguing with a guy who was a woman. She made a gesture and I went over. She was telling the guy she moved on and I am her boyfriend now. We haven't kissed before. It was our first date, but she tried to French kiss me and became quite forceful. I pushed her back gently and told her to calm down. She was angry and went on to the bar to chat with a guy I assumed she didn't know and went with him to sit at a different table. Still standing next to the other couple, I didn't know how to feel. So we burst out laughing to shake the tension. I wished them a lovely evening and went. I guess this is one of my worst ones. I once went dancing with a date and she went home with someone she met at the club. When I was in high school, summer after junior year, I went to a house party hosted by some kids in my neighboring town I played travel soccer with. This really cute girl I didn't know overheard me mention that I was thinking of going to the beach the following day. She immediately started flirting with me the rest of the night and strongly suggested that I take her with me so we can spend the day together. So I pick her up the next day and we get to the beach and lo and behold, all her closest guy friends, including the guy she clearly really wanted, was there. Apparently, she just needed me to get there and didn't bother even introducing me to anyone. I felt like an effing moron. I stuck out basically by myself for a few hours while she chilled with them, but I wound up getting the last laugh. They were heading back to one of their houses for a pool party and didn't have room for her, so she comes back asking me if I want to go. I told her, sorry, I have plans, got in my car and left her standing there in the parking lot. Her dad apparently had to come pick her up 2 hours later when he got off work. I was once making out with an older girl. In the midst of the action, she said she had to go to the bathroom and never came back. Later on, she messaged me saying she couldn't stop thinking about her ex whilst making out with me and had to leave so as to call him. Go figure. Not me, but my wife and I observed this in a nice restaurant in Berkeley, California a long time ago. We were having the prix-fixe dinner and sat down a booth away from another younger couple, early 20s. After a while, the woman gets up and presumably goes to the bathroom. We are minding our own business, but after a while, we notice the guy is sitting there by himself for quite a long time. The waiter comes up to him and they have a serious conversation that we can't hear. Then they get up together and leave. A few minutes later, they come back and the guy leaves. When we finished and were leaving, we asked the cashier what was going on. He said that the couple were on a date and had agreed to go Dutch on the prix-fixe dinner. Dinner for two plus wine would probably be $150-ish or so. And she ditched him after the main course. He did not have a credit card or enough cash to cover both the dinners, so the waiter escorted him to the nearest ATM outside, where he got cash to pay for both their meals. Poor guy. However, OP, not nearly as bad as your story. You win. It was not a date, to me at least. I was invited to a dinner and a movie by my physical therapist after completion of long-term treatment after a car accident. I get to her house and a party is in progress. It is our engagement party. She had told her whole family that we had been dating and now we're getting married. They even had a banner with our names on it. I walked out. By the way, I am gay. I had been talking to the new girl at work. She had been over to my apartment once and we had gone running on a second meetup. We also had a movie night that turned into a light makeout session at my apartment. She still lived at home. I invited her over to make her dinner after those first few meetups and she brought her boyfriend. We all had a drink and then I made the excuse that I had to go out and they had to go. No soup for you. She said she left the last guy because he drank too much. She proceeded to have 9 beers on each of our 2 dates. I struggled to go through 3. My idea on drinking a lot is now somehow fuzzy. I got invited to a concert out of town by a girl in my uni. Just me and her, and we had been on 1 date before. The date ended with her disappearing without a word, and after an hour or so, I got a message from her brother who said he could drive me home for way too much money, but I kinda had to accept since I was stuck. It was a Tinder date. We went for lunch. She was so boring, gave one-word answers to most questions, etc. Final nail in the coffin was when she asked me what I did for a living, and I told her and explained I'm a manufacturing engineer working for a large car company. Just after this, I went to the toilet. On the way back to my seat, I noticed she was midway through Googling how much manufacturing engineers make a year. I finished my lunch, then excused myself to the toilet again, but I just walked out and left. Haven't got time for people like that. She was chewing gum when her mixed drink and appetizer came. She spit it into her hand and stuck it under the table. I slapped $50 down, got my pocket knife out and scraped it off the bottom of the table and walked to the men's room and put it in the trash. Walked back to the table and told her to enjoy her night. She just wanted a free meal. She insisted I paid for an expensive sushi place, but when she was on her phone and wouldn't even have a conversation with me, I asked the waitress for separate checks and she got pissed off and left without paying, getting banned. I did end up paying after she left and was banned. It was her favorite sushi place too. Oh well. Probably not as bad as you, but when I was 17, I met a guy through Grindr. He was supposed to be 19. Well, he showed up late, and he was 40. I left that date very quickly. Oh man, I have a good one. Gotta dot point this bad boy. Maybe a year and a half ago, I went on a date who started the evening by saying, "Oh, so you're like a strong 3?" And when I jokingly responded, "So, a 4?" she reaffirmed, "Nah, strong 3." After the cashier at the restaurant made a mistake calculating the bill and accidentally overcharged us for the drink, she said, "Aren't your people supposed to be good at maths?" We were at a Mexican restaurant, so not only was she being awfully racist, it wasn't even the correct hateful stereotype. Also, the dude was white. After sorting that out, I suggested that we split the bill 50-50, as I'd had a pretty bad time and didn't want or expect a second date, to which she responded, "It's your treat," and walked out to wait for me on the sidewalk. Outside, she suggested that we go back to her place, and despite her being very attractive, I was like, "Nah man, sorry." And she began screaming, demanding I go back with her, and complaining that she's just wasted a whole night. I bail and ditch her. Go home to tell my housemates of the disaster. After telling this story, one of them says, "Strong 3? Dude, that's terrible. You're not a strong 3, you're like a weak 5. So a effing 4? Just say 4. Edit. Because people keep asking about the maths racial comment part, she had spent the majority of the date being casually or subtly racist, but it wasn't funny or interesting, so I didn't list it in the story. Still an assumption on my part, but given her track record, it was an incredibly easy one. What would be about halfway through at dinner, she asked how old I thought she was. I was 21 at the time, so I assumed 21 like she had said and drove there. She then stated she was 17. I got up, placed money for the food on the table, and said, "Right, this was inappropriate," and left. Was hung up on this girl in high school. Asked her to the dance. Day of the dance, I was at the basketball game beforehand, and she showed up with another guy and told me she changed her mind. She had started dating this guy a week before the dance, and she never even told me until the day of. The guy didn't even know anything about it. Immediately lost all respect for her. She already had a tendency to go through boyfriends super quick. The new guy lasted another day before they broke up. Girl seemed super interested in me. I drove an hour to where she lived to meet up with her for drinks. Sat in the parking lot for an hour waiting to hear from her. She ghosted me, never showed up. I was being honest and told the girl that I was a virgin. She said, "Sorry, I can't be your first," and got up and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel, press the like button, and don't forget to watch our other videos.